What's up, healthy couch potatoes? My name is Zach, and today we're continuing the series on macronutrients with carbohydrates. Now, maybe I am projecting what I've heard growing up, but it certainly seems like the general consensus is that carbs are the root of all evil when it comes to diets, and I'd like to just kind of dispel that. I feel that with a little bit of knowledge, you can manage them quite well. And so in this video, we'll first go over the types of carbs and their sources, and then we'll finish off with managing the amount or the appropriate level of carbs that we should be consuming. So there are three types of carbs. The first one is just regular sugars, the second being complex carbs or starches, and the third one being fibers. Guys, I need you to stop what you're doing and pay super close attention to what I'm about to tell you. I've been going over this specific scientific article regarding macronutrients, and it looks like if you don't click like on this video and subscribe, as much as 70% of the protein that's currently in your body will instantaneously become trans fat, and you will simultaneously suffer both a heart attack and gain diabetes. So just click like, click subscribe, and we can move on, and nobody has to die. So let's go ahead and get started with sugars, the form of carbs that get the most hate. The reason they're deemed so unhealthy is because of the speed at which they are digested when we consume them. So the first thing that happens when you have some sugar is you get a spike in your blood pressure. And also, the second thing you'll notice is you are still hungry. With them being digested so quickly, they don't really satiate us at all, which leaves us prone to consuming a whole ton more than we mean to. And if you've ever had chocolate, then you probably know what I mean. So consuming too many sugars in one go will lead to some inflammation. And if you continue to do that over the process of weeks, months, and years, you'll eventually develop diabetes, and you could possibly get something worse like heart disease or cancer. Now, with that said, as long as you don't already have diabetes or any other serious medical condition, you should be just fine. All you have to do is consume a responsible amount of said sugars each day, and you'll be fine. At the end of the day, all sugar and carbs in general, for that matter, are an energy source for our body to consume and burn off as fuel. So as long as you're consuming a proper amount of that and not going overboard, you're going to be just fine. So sugars are naturally found in fruits, honey, and dairy. And the reason you never hear nutritionists and dietitians complain about sugars in this context is because of the nutrients that are typically found in those foods. For instance, I'll say fruits are typically high in antioxidants. So what about added sugars? Those are supposed to be absolutely terrible for you, right? Kind of, but not really. At the end of the day, sugar is just sugar. And again, as long as you're consuming a healthy amount of it, you're not really in any danger. The reason that dietitians and nutritionists hate added sugars is actually for the products that they're attached to, because they're just not nutritious. And when I say that, I'm thinking of soft drinks and desserts. So here are some foods that are just not going to satiate you at all. You can eat them all day long, and your blood sugar is just going to go out of this world, and you're going to feel terrible for it. You could consume a cup of water, or you could consume a cup of soda, and you're basically going to feel the same, except with one of the options, you've just consumed 55 grams of sugar, and you're just on a sugar high. So just be responsible about it, and we can move on. Going on to starches. So starches, also known as complex carbohydrates, are chains of simple sugars put together. So they're kind of the same thing, but really they're not. The main difference is the speed at which we digest them. So because our body has to break down those strings to get to the sugar, they leave us more full. And also they don't spike our blood sugar as high. And another thing to consider is that because we're slowly digesting them, our blood sugar stays, not only is it more temperate with the spike, but it also stays at a raised level for longer. So if you digest your sugars really quickly, you might get like a bunch of energy at once and then you crash. Whereas with starches, it kind of lasts longer until you can have your next meal. Now, starches can be found in pastas, breads, crackers, and also some vegetables such as corn and potatoes. I do have a link in here, which I will include in the description, as well as a link to my blog if you want to see the other links I have here. So here's just a quick ranking of certain foods that have them. And one thing I wanted to highlight was pretzels. Somehow they have an insanely high amount of starch, and I did not know this until I was looking it up. So if you ever need more healthy carbs, just have some pretzels. I figured it was simple because you typically don't have to prepare pretzels in any special way. You can just devour them at will. Another thing I want to mention is to be careful with refined carbs and starches. Sometimes you won't notice it on a nutrition label and you'll think you're having good starches, but really they're refined. And that refining process typically strips whatever you're eating of a lot of valuable nutrients. And so because of that, and also the refining process breaks down starches, so they just get digested as quickly as sugars, you're really just not doing yourself any favors. You may as well just be having regular sugar or candy. And that tends to be the case with like white rice and anything that's not whole grain. So this is why dietitians and nutritionists are always really going hard for whole grain products. So just something to think about. You really want to get on those whole grains. I certainly do that with all my pastas, and I try to eat brown rice when I can. Another thing is that you may have heard of issues with whole grain somewhere on the internet. It's not exactly misinformation, but it's definitely overhyped. And let's just go through the reasons that certain blogs or articles will denounce whole grain foods. You'll find two main reasons. The first one is that they may contain something called anti-nutrients, which are phytic acids and lectins. And the former, phytic acids, can bind minerals together, making them indigestible, or maybe a better word to use is unabsorbable, so that our body can't use them. And the other thing is called lectins, which I'll just put it simply for you, it can harm your gut. But upon doing further research, there's anti-nutrients in so many healthy foods that you eat, and they're in such small amounts that it really doesn't matter. Now, this can matter in certain underdeveloped countries, and that's because their diets all their carbs are basically completely limited to whole grain foods that they grow themselves, and they can't refine them. So I would encourage you not to worry about that balance, especially if you're eating any sort of vegetables or candies or have any amount of sugars going in. You really don't have to worry about this balance or having too many anti-nutrients. You'll be fine. The other thing that I see, and this is mostly for keto diet advertising, is that they spike your blood sugar levels. And of course they do. Any carb is going to spike your blood sugar level. That's exactly what it's supposed to do. It's sugar. Once it's broken down, of course, if it's starch. That said, I've already explained that starches don't spike as hard as refined sugars or just general sugars. So yeah. The last category we have now is fibers. So this might be a little bit shocking to you, but fibers can't actually be digested in most cases. They just kind of go right through us and come out the way they came in for the most part. But that actually has huge uses for our digestion, and so fibers are a necessary supplement to the food that we consume, just to make sure that we can process other foods better. So it does a few things. It enhances the quality of our stool so that we have better colorectal health, but also it forces our stomachs or intestines to make more bile acid, and bile acid actually uses up bad cholesterol, or LDL. You'll know if you read my other article that I wrote about fats. That should be my previous video. I'll have a link into the description. So fiber is found in some berries like blackberries and raspberries. It's also found in the skin of fruits, namely apples and pears. And really, the best source, in my opinion, is beans, because I can just have some brown rice and beans with my meal prep each week, and I'm good on the starches and the fibers. So finally, we can talk about the amount of carbs you should be consuming daily. And funny enough, there's no real correct answer. That's kind of like asking someone how much gasoline they put in their car per week. Depends on how much you're driving, right? And also depends on how your metabolism burns gasoline. So I can definitely give you some general guidelines though, and I'll use myself as an example so that you can hopefully figure out how many carbs you need. What I recommend is first figure out the amount of fats and proteins you need in your diet, and then approximate the amount of calories you're going to need in that day. Depending on how active you are, you might need more or less. Or maybe you're trying to gain weight like I am, and you'll see how that plays into my diet. So consider me. I need about 80 grams of fat and 170 grams of protein, which comes out to about 1,300 calories. And I'm looking at basically a 3,000 calorie diet. So that leaves about 1,600 calories left for me to consume in carbs, which comes out to 400, which is a ton. And I feel like I just eat all day and never stop. And that's just something you go through when you're trying to deliberately gain weight. So with all that said, I hope you learned something about carbs today, and I also hope that you're feeling a little bit less guilty about those desserts. So be sure to check out my other macronutrient videos. I have one for fats and I have one for proteins. And with those, you should be able to start building up your own personal diet that works for you and feeling great in no time. So good stuff, my aspiring healthy couch potatoes. Y'all take care.